Chapter 13, A Bushel of Neckties. And here is a sketch. Ooh, and it's really starting to rain right now. How fun. Can you guys hear that on the top of our 21 window? A bushel of neckties. Sometime during the night, Cut-Eye Higgins left Hangtown for parts unknown. In the days that followed, Praiseworthy's name and reputation spread through the diggings. He was pointed out to new immigrants as someone of consequence, and Jack basked in reflected glory. The truth of the matter was that Praiseworthy himself began to enjoy his notoriety, and like chameleons, the two partners changed their colors to those of the Sierra Nevadas. They wore red miners' shirts and jack boots and wide-brimmed hats against the summer sun. Probably a Stetson hat. John Stetson invented those during the gold mine, and they're still really revered to this day. Also, Levi Strauss invented the jean that's still obviously worn today. After a week in the diggings, there was little of the butler left to be seen in Praiseworthy, unless it was the straightness of his back and the quiet reserve of his glance. And then, as if to live up to his reputation, he stopped shaving. Within a few days, he began to look decidedly fierce. Jack collected 4 tin cans against the day when they would stake their claim. They bought a dust-stained canvas tent at the Cheap John auction and pitched it beside Pitch Pine Billy's tent. All they lacked to go prospecting was a burro and a grub stake of beans, bacon, flour, and coffee. They shoveled dirt and panned mud from morning till night. Pitch Pine Billy taught them every trick he knew, including the setting of flea traps. After dark, they filled their gold pans with soapy water and placed them beside a lighted candle stuck in the dirt floor of the tent. "The candle gets the varmints to jumpin'," Pitch Pine Billy exclaimed. "About the only thing a flea ain't learned to do is take a bath. They hop in that soap water and drown." But candles were $1 each, and some of the miners preferred the fleas. There were days when a man was lucky to wash out enough spangles to pay for his grub, while an ounce of gold brought $16 far away in San Francisco. It was worth a mere $4 at the diggings, and it didn't buy much. Onions were $1.50 a pound. Supplies had to be freighted in, and prices were high. Salt pork sold for 50 cents an ounce. Gold dust seemed more plentiful than flour. Hay was weighted out at 8 cents a pound. "Oh, I seen some mighty fancy prices," laughed Pitch Pine Billy, frying up a loaf of bread in his gold pan. "There was a fellow come to the diggings with a jar of raisins. The boys ain't seen a raisin since they left home, and their mouths began to slabber. You'd think it was caviar in that jar. Them raisins fetched their weight in gold dust, come to $4,000. Slowly, day by day, Praiseworthy and Jack added to their grub stake. They had blankets, a dozen candles, and a coffee pot. One noon, Jack pulled up a tuft of grass, and a glint of light from the roots made him gasp. "A nugget!" And then his yell carried from one end of the ravine to the other. "A nugget!" Praiseworthy dropped his gold pan, and Pitch Pine Billy squinted. Jimmy from town, who wore a mustache twisted into sharp points, came running over, and Buffalo John woke from a sound sleep. Soon a dozen miners had left their claims to stand around and admire Jack's catch. The lump of gold was the size of an acorn. It was trapped in the fine grass roots like a fly in a spider's web. "Maybe it'll buy us a burro," Jack grinned. "Well, I dunno," smiled Pitch Pine Billy. "The tail of a jackass, anyway." Buffalo John pulled the bandana off his head and polished the nugget. The miners passed it around, holding it up to the sun to watch it shine, and from that moment on, it became known as Jamocha Jack's Nugget. That night, Praiseworthy and Jack and Pitch Pine Billy went to town for supper. There was a letter waiting at the hotel from Dr. Buckbee. It was written in a shaky hand. "My dear friends, your letter finds me weakened by the yellow fever from Panama, and I can barely hold this pen steady. Curse that Higgins fellow and the gang of highwaymen you write of. Since I cannot leave my bed, please act as my agents in the matter. If you are able to recover my map, I will make you partners in the mine. 50-50. Act quickly. I beg of you, before all is lost. So Dr. Buckbee, wow. Praiseworthy finished reading the letter and folded it thoughtfully. A generous enough offer, he said to Jack. Half interest in a gold mine. Jack's yellow eyebrows lifted. All they had to do was get on the trail of those road agents. We'll need guns, he said quickly. A 4-shooter would fit fine in his belt alongside his horn spoon and buckskin pouch. Maybe he could trade his nugget for a pistol. Praiseworthy scratched through the stubble growing out on his face. What we need is a burro. A burro to chase outlaws, said Jack. Praiseworthy put the letter in his shirt pocket. He shook his head. We've no time for such speculations. First, those vultures no doubt ripped open Cut-Eye Higgins' coat and discovered the map. Second, they may already have located the mine by now. Maps! Pitchpine Billy laughed. Why, there is so many maps floating around the diggings you could paper a room with them. Boys, let's eat! They ordered Hangtown fries, platters of bacon, canned oysters, and eggs. Praiseworthy turned to Jack. What do you want to drink? Jack glanced up at the waiter. Coffee, he said. Coffee, sir, with a few acorns ground up. Do you guys hear the rain? It sounds so pretty. After dinner, Praiseworthy stayed behind in the hotel lobby to reply to Dr. Buckbee's letter. Jack and Pitchpine Billy went wandering along the street to see the sights. The auction bell began to clang. Maybe Cheap John would have pistols to sell, Jack thought. Let's go, he said. Don't mind, said Pitchpine Billy. And here's everybody eating, feasting. The auctioneer placed a keg of salt butter outside the brightly lit tent, and the miners gathered around his delicacy like flies. They unclasped their jackknives and carved off butter shavings and ate them off their blades. Between the ringing of the bell and the free butter, a crowd had formed and the sale began. Frenchmen rubbed shoulders with Sonorians and Chileans and Germans and Missourians, with Yankees and Englishmen, with Kanakas from the Sandwich Islands. There were sailors who had deserted their ships to run off to the mines, and soldiers who had left their garrisons at Monterey and San Francisco. The auctioneer mounted a barrel at the rear of the tent. He was a paunchy man in an open vest and a plug hat. What'll you take for the hat, Cheap John? Someone yelled. Ain't for sale, said the auctioneer, but I got 10 pounds of Chinese sugar, that is. What am I bid, gents? Who'll give me $1 a pound? Dollar, 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 dollar. I got $1. Who'll give me $1.50? Half, $2. Am I bid $2, boys? Two. Dos pesos, said a Spaniard with silver buttons down his trouser legs. Jack waded through the sale of sugar, a wheelbarrow, tin pans, butcher knives, and a sack of dried apples. The auctioneer seemed to have no guns. The miners stood around whittling and enjoying themselves. I got a bushel of neckties sent here by mistake, boys, said the Cheap John. They'd fetch $1 apiece back in the States. What do you give me for the lot? Am I bid $10? Am I bid $9? $9? The miners stood grinning and whittling and silent. At that moment, Jimmy from town spied Jack and Pitchpine Billy. Let's go get something to eat, he said. My stomach feels like a cat in Hades without claws. 9, 9, 9, called the auctioneer. We've done, said Pitchpine Billy. Done what? Asked Jimmy from town, twisting the ends of his mustache hungrily. 8, said Jack. 8, called the auctioneer. I'm bid $8 by the young feller with yeller eyebrows. Sold for $8. Uh-oh. Different kind of 8, huh? EIGHT versus ATE. Jack stood as if struck by lightning. The miners began to chuckle. Looks like you bought yourself a bushel of neckties, Jamocha Jack, laughed Pitchpine Billy. But I said ATE, not EIGHT, Jack protested. That's what I heard you say. 8, answered the Cheap John, pushing the plug hat to the back of his head. ATE. We ain't much on spelling around here. It was clear to everyone that the auctioneer hadn't expected to be able to sell the ties at all. You ain't going back on your word, are ya? Can't do that, whispered Pitchpine Billy. I'd rather see you break your leg than your word, boy. Pay up. The auctioneer was grinning. Why, you got them ties? Dirt cheap. Of course we ain't much on tie wearing here at the diggings except to be buried in. And he burst out laughing. The miners looked upon the affair as harmless fun. Might be able to stuff a pillow with them, someone called out. Knot 'em together and lasso chickens. Jack stepped up to the gold scale and pulled the buckskin pouch from his belt. The nugget tumbled out. He borrowed a knife and carved half of it away, bit by bit. It hurt. He clamped his jaws with anger. Then he picked up the bushel of neckties and worked his way through the crowd to the street. Ain't so sure I'd even want to be buried in one of them things, a miner laughed. Praiseworthy was coming along the street from the hotel and Jack could barely face him. He had cut 2 ounces off his nugget that might have gone toward their grub stake or a gun. But even Pitchpine Billy and Jimmy from town were chuckling. What have you got there? Praiseworthy asked, raising one eyebrow. Neckties, Jack murmured, a whole bushel of them. Praiseworthy raised the other eyebrow. Neckties? Yes, sir. Jimmy from town loosened his gold pouch. I guess it was my fault, he smiled. I'll pay you for them ties, Jamocha Jack, as long as you don't make me wear one. Me either, grinned Pitchpine Billy. Praiseworthy held up his hand. Put away your dust. He looked at Jack. That was a fine purchase, he smiled. A brilliant purchase. Jack gazed up at Praiseworthy. What? We'll buy our mountain canary with neckties. Pitchpine Billy crimped an eye. You gone out of your head, Bullwhip? Why, you couldn't give them things away in Hangtown. The only necktie you can get on a man is made out of rope. Praiseworthy scratched his short whiskers. They were at an itchy stage. He smiled, half shutting one eye. Unless I miss my guess, every man in the diggings will come begging for a necktie in a day or two. They'll fight to get one. He picked up the bushel basket and swung it on his shoulders. Come along, partner. And we are going to stop there.